All right. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the ABRSC to order. We have need for an executive session tonight to be convened under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation because of an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the committee. We will return to open meeting at approximately 7:15. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
We'll do a roll call vote. Yes. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to ActonTV for taping this meeting and providing it on their website, actontv.org. I'd like to open this meeting by thanking our past chair, Diane Baum, for everything that she's done in the past year. Amy and I joked this morning that I didn't know what I was going to say because Diane would probably remark on the passing of Toni Morrison and have some fabulous quote that totally connected to everything that we were doing and talking about this evening. So I looked for a quote. So I did find a quote that pertained to Diane. And it was Toni Morrison's thoughts about her writing process. She said, "Writing is really a way of thinking, not just feeling, but thinking about things that are disparate, unresolved, mysterious, problematic, or just sweet." One of the things that I found most striking about Diane, under her tutelage, sort of, is that she is able to look at the whole picture and find all of the little nitty-gritty things that either are in sync with each other or aren't in sync with each other, and she pulls laws and policies and other things out of the air. I don't know where she finds them, and brings them all together in a meeting that gives us structure and context, and it all makes much more sense. So she's leaving enormous shoes to fill, because I don't know that I can do that, but I will certainly attempt to. On top of all of that, she's become an amazing friend this year, and I'm glad that you're staying on as vice chair for your advice and everything else. If anyone else wants to say something about Diane or thank her for this year, then now would be the appropriate time. Paul?
Well, she's not leaving yet. She's still on the committee. So, but what I appreciate is a thoughtful and deliberate leadership, and that's kind of what we needed. So thank you.
I don't have anything prepared, but I found your style of leadership to be inspiring. You put so much work, time, thought, and purpose into what anything that you took on, and you took on a lot, and I'm sure your whole family is keenly aware of that, and we are also, and we're very, very grateful. Thank you for everything.
So I will say, I think it's been an amazing year. Diane, constantly, what everybody has said, what you have brought to the table, just so much thoughtfulness. You do so much research, you think things through, and then you come in with some, really profound and unique insights that are really important. And I have really enjoyed working with you, and I've enjoyed having you as a friend, too.
I just want to say that I think you did an awesome job, and you did it, and really thank you for the dedication and the courage to that. I know that you step out and take on the responsibility, and you spend so much time and develop the leadership and in your style, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, everyone. I did not expect that at all. I just want to say that it's fun for me to weave together all of those things and to think about things, and it was a lot of growth for me last year, and those are two of my favorite things. So thank you for coming along for the ride and allowing me to be your leader for a year.
I'm just going to jump in too, because you got to the mic before I did. But I just wanted to thank you. That, last year was my first year as a superintendent. First year at Acton Boxborough, I couldn't think of a better person to work with. You were always prepared. You were thoughtful. You thought at a very deep level about all of the issues that we had over the course of the year. We know that the school committee chair-superintendent relationship is so critical to the effectiveness of the whole district, and it was just really a tribute to you that it made it an easy year for me. So thank you.
So Beth will laugh, because she told me that on my chair's agenda that all the things in bold red were for me to read, and the things that were in parentheses were just commentary. But I'm supposed to give you your card in flowers, but because Idlewild is closed today, there are no flowers, because it's Tuesday. So we have a gift instead. And I think the card is... All right. This is the part of the meeting per policy BEDH when members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes on items not included on this agenda. Comments regarding items on the agenda should be made during that part of the meeting. Typically, the committee administration will not respond to comments during public participation. Is there anyone that wishes to make a comment? Okay. So next on our agenda is the superintendent's update.
All right, so I think last year when we had our business meeting in the summer, it was probably about 3 days before school started. So we have just over 3 weeks and a day, and it is hard to imagine that we're thinking about school starting up. There's a part of me that knows it's coming like a train through a tunnel, and the other part of me knows that for many in our community, it's still just August 1st, and we're just starting summer. So we're treading water in between, but I want to provide you a few updates. First, I want to do a little recognition of one of our graduates, Christopher Wang. He just recently received a gold medal, and he placed third overall in the International Biology Olympiad. Christopher was the top performer for Team USA at the competition held in July in Hungary. The competition was the 30th such event and included 285 students from over 74 countries. This is a tremendous honor, and we just want to congratulate Christopher. I also put in a link if you want to read more about that event. Our annual report will be hitting mailboxes soon. We tried to revive the annual report this year. It's been a number of years since the district was able to communicate directly with every household in both communities and not just our families. That report is now out to print and is scheduled to be mailed August 15th. So it should be in mailboxes shortly thereafter. One of the goals of that report, and I just want to keep iterating this publicly over and over. The goal of that report, and by printing it this first year, was to try and get as many people as possible to sign up for our digital newsletters. So I'm also putting a link to sign up for the digital newsletters right here. But we want to start building that email list so we can communicate with people digitally. Our intent is to do an annual report each year and then follow that by 3 quarterly reports that go out to the community as a way of keeping in touch with everyone. I value professional learning. And I just thought it was important, as much as we value professional learning for our teachers, we also do that for all of us as administrators as well. But Dawn, Deb, and I just recently had a chance to go together to the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Annual Executive Institute, which is held at Mashpee High School. And it was really a great institute this year. A lot of the topics focused on work that we were doing around equity and also around social emotional learning. So 2 topics that are very close to home here. What's great to know is we're not alone in this work. There are a number of superintendents all across the state engaged in this work, and it's an opportunity for us not only to attend some presentations and hear from some fantastic keynote speakers, but also to network and understand what other districts are doing so we can share best practices and bring things back to Acton Boxborough that work in other places. First day of school. Sorry, students, if you're watching this. Hopefully you're not watching a school committee in August if you're a student. But our first day of school is scheduled for Wednesday, August 28th. We included start times in the school committee packet. We'll be sending that out to families as well after the meeting, and principals will be sending that home as well. We do have an exciting piece of news, and I'm not going to steal all of JD's thunder, but I get to steal the good parts of it. But we are launching an application called Here Comes the Bus, and there's a link to that for anyone reading this update, and that actually provides the families GPS access to where the school buses are located as they're driving routes during the day. It's a request that's been coming over the last year or so. We've been piloting piloting it. We did a beta pilot over the summer with our extended school year program. It worked very well. So we're very excited that is in place for people as we begin the fall. I also just want to send out a reminder that, as the high school schedule changed, we also changed the start time of the high school slightly. If you remember, as Larry Dory was updating the committee earlier this year, one of the largest areas of concern from our students was a reduction in lunchtime. They wanted to maintain that longer lunch, and Larry spent a considerable amount of time listening to students and listening to families over the course of the fall and into the winter, and what he and his administrative team came to the conclusion of, if they started the school just a little bit earlier, then they could maintain that lunchtime. The good news was, we're still picking students up from the bus at the same time as we have in previous years. So we're not making students wake up earlier. We're just having the buses go to the high school first to drop students off before they then go to the junior high. That will necessitate a change in the traffic pattern so that rather than buses coming in from 111 down Charter Road from the junior high to the high school, the buses will now return to coming in from Hayward, hit the high school first, then go up Charter Road, drop at the junior high, and then they're actually going to be leaving the junior high, turning right on 111, and that will actually keep almost all of our bus traffic out of Kelly's Corner, which we think will have an ancillary effect of reducing traffic along 27, which was also providing a challenge for some of our families to get to the junior high when they were dropping students off. So we're excited about that. We wanted to get this information out to you and the community through this update. My next update is regarding the building project. You can tell it's been a while since I updated you by the number of updates. And Adam is going to update later, but where we do send this update out to families, we wanted to put some things in writing for everyone. But this is really an incredibly important time for the building project between now and, really in December. So we are just at a point where next Wednesday, the building committee will receive the official first round of cost estimates back with regard to the building project, and then they're going to engage in the process of looking at those cost estimates and making some really thoughtful decisions about how to control costs and while maintaining an outstanding educational program. That's a process that takes place in every building project that's ever done. It's a process called value engineering. So that will happen over the next two building committee meetings, August 14th and then again on August 28th. And then in early September, I believe it is, we just added the meeting, September 4th, the building committee will come back and actually will vote the final schematic design that will be sent to MSBA on September 11th. That is our final MSBA submission, and then we're scheduled to have a board meeting with MSBA on October 28th. That is the board meeting where they will look at all of the work in our schematic design, and they will approve us, hopefully. We'll knock on wood for that. They will approve the project officially and also give us the final reimbursement for funding, which will allow us to then put out a very clear, firm financial model to the community. Once the state sets that reimbursement rate and the total project budget, it cannot exceed that with state reimbursement. The community could choose to, but we're just not doing that. Once we set the budget, that's the budget for the project. We're also in the process of hiring a construction manager, and that is a subcommittee of the building committee who's responsible for that. There's several staff members that are involved in that, plus a couple of our building committee members who have specific experience in that field. So we'll be working on that as we go through the fall. And the last piece that I really wanted to make you aware of, but also our community, in anticipation of the importance of this information that people need to have as we go through the fall, we've revised our building project webpage to make information more accessible to the public. There are now frequently asked questions. We have news items that come out of every building committee meeting that we put out on the website. Those then get put out on social media as well. So regardless of how someone wants to access the information, there's information going out. We also have a page just for our cost estimates, and as our debt subcommittee continues their work, all of their information will go on to that website once they come up with a financial model, so it's very clear. And then we're also working on an additional page to add to that around the sustainability initiatives that we have going with regard to the building project. So we're encouraging everyone. That is probably right now the best source of information to get about what's going on with the building project if you're looking for facts and figures because you get questions. The frequently asked questions are all items that we've been asked in various formats in our community forums, and we wanted to put those back out for the community. Finally, I want to give a huge thanks to the ActonTV Board of Directors. So recently, the ActonTV Board voted to fully fund all of the broadcast media that we needed for the auditorium building over in the administration facility so that we can move our school committee meetings there. That is a huge level of support coming from that organization, and I just want to thank them tremendously for that. The improvements that we're doing in that space not only allow us to move our committee meetings there, but it's an enhanced professional learning space that we intend to use throughout the school year, and it also provides enhancements for our students who access community education programs in that space. So really big thanks to Acton TV, to the board, and we're looking forward to moving into the space. Currently, we're anticipating that that will happen around October 1st. The challenge with the admin auditorium is it's used highly during summer months, and so it was not advantageous to do construction while community education students are in there, so we decided to delay the work we needed to do in the admin auditorium until very, very late summer, early fall, and it should be ready by October 1st for us to move in. So we're excited about that. You may also know, but Acton TV has an important public hearing coming up on August 19th at 7 p.m. at the Acton Town Hall, and that is in regards to the renewal of the cable television license with Verizon. So that may be of interest to any of you and also the community. With that said, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Peter. Early on, you mentioned first day of school as the 28th, but that's just for the ninth grade orientation? And it's the 29th, that's the full?
It is it's all K through 6, and then it's also the orientation at the high school.
Okay, yeah.
Junior high.
And 7th.
7th and 9th, yeah. Thank you.
With respect to the comment that you made about value engineering for the building, I think it's really important to note that the building committee has worked very hard to make good strategic decisions that lead up to that. So while clearly, there is, more opportunity to do what we can to reduce the cost of the project, the building subcommittee should get full credit for, a series of very consequential strategic decisions which represent, the savings of tens of millions of dollars, which, are extremely important in terms of viability of the project.
No, thank you. I think that's a great point, and I think the community actually helped make those decisions already. For example, we know if we were just replacing Douglas and only that one school, the cost to replace that building alone was $99 million. And so if we were to try and do Douglas independently, Gates independently, and a preschool independently, we've saved tens of millions of dollars just by that one decision alone to build, 3 buildings in the one facility. So, great point.
All right, so then we will move to item 4, 4.1, which is our operations update. So I'd invite JD up here. Adam?
I think Peter missed the thunder stealing from you about the being fully staffed for bus drivers. I think considering last year's challenge with that, it'll be nice to not have you running dispatch at the beginning of school. So congratulations on being fully staffed.
So when you access the Here Comes the Bus app, will it be playing the wheels on the bus as you search for your time? The question that I had, with respect to, I noticed there were a number of projects around Blanchard. And obviously one of the questions that came up, with respect to our current building project is, the timing of new buildings. And of course, if you look at debt service, the question is, what might be out there 10 or 20 years? So in the context of Blanchard, what ultimately is going to bring that building to end of life? And when might that be, not to the year, but sort of to the decade? So just so that I get a sort of a more specific answer. So I understand, obviously, that, these buildings, just like cars, if you maintain them, they can run a long time. And as you say, we're doing a lot of things to make sure the building's, well maintained. So to ask the question specifically, do you imagine that Blanchard will provide at least 20 years of service from where we are today? The main...
I don't have questions, but, when I read through those stuff, what you provide to us is very well organized, item by item, and then also very clear on everything, very transparent. So I would say this is good. So
when we first talked about launching the CIP, we talked about putting up a spreadsheet on the website to track what we're doing and the funds that we're spending. So do you have an update on that for us?
I've actually been working on that project since February. So Amy Bizowitz and I had a conference call in early March with our website vendor, and we provided all the requested information that we wanted, the format. We sent them a copy of the spreadsheet that we had used to develop it. I would say probably 2 weeks ago now, I got the first draft back. I provided comments that day, sent them back. I have not heard back from the vendor yet. We're anticipating with bated breath that we will hear back sometime soon. We're just experiencing technical delays on the vendor side of it. They have not been as responsive as we would hope. So we would like to see that happen.
All right. Thank you, JD. All right. Up next, item 4.2, we've got Dave with the budget update.
Thank you, Tessa. While Beth loads the brief presentation, I'll remind you that you got a two-page memo from me regarding the preliminary closing for fiscal 19. We're still in the closing process. It should be a couple more weeks, and so during September I'll make a final report on FY19 and have more details. Thank you. The memo that I gave to you in the packet obviously is one more year of good news relative to the overall picture of the district's finances. We had a significant revenue variance to the good. We had a significant expenditure variance to the good. E&D looks like it's going to be right within the targeted range, and I couldn't be happier to be the one to get to report that information. So in pictures, you can see that if you get a handle on the colored bars and the grand totals and the scale, we had another good year. Revenues have been robust the last three relative to budget. Expenditures looks like the variance is a bit down, but I'm going to have a comment about that. And obviously all 3 years have finished in excess of $1 million to the good. There were a couple of events that occurred during the fourth quarter relative to the third quarter report. One of them was we were able to prepay the early retirement liability that's a contractual liability for ABEA. By doing so, we may be able to skip 1 year, hence the picture, of this future liability. Depending upon the extent of the liability in the final year of the program, which is FY21, and we won't know the dollar amount until mid-year because they get, I believe, until December to elect to participate. We won't know the exact numbers, but that is coming, and so by prepaying, we think we were able to potentially shave some or all of a year off that liability. Circuit breaker reserve, each of the last 3 years, we were able to build this reserve up. You see the blue shaded columns on the chart. The declining reimbursement is not particularly worrisome to me because when you think about it, the reimbursement is based on how much you're spending in tuition. And so by one measure, if the tuitions are fairly consistent, then declining reimbursement can indicate declining tuition. And tuition expenditures, the gross expenditures, have moderated during my time at the district. We're close to not being able to keep any more. You're only allowed to keep 1 year of reserve in circuit breaker. It has to be spent within the following 12 months. By getting to an entire year's worth in the year-end balance, in my view, what that gives you from year to year is budget certainty. We'd be able to budget whatever is in there because we'd have to do that, and it would allow the maximum amount of cushion against unforeseen expenses in special education tuition. So on the second page of my memo, I got a little wonky and I put in 3 paragraphs that got into the weeds about how E&D is calculated. So I took this picture from the DOR manual to show that it's a very complicated process. It actually isn't, but I do apologize to those who had a hard time following the memo. I view my role in publicly presenting financial information. It's important to document the district's results and compare and relate that to E&D. It really isn't that complex. Maybe it hasn't been done before. It probably certainly hasn't been done in text form before, but I'm trying to relate the pluses and minuses from the first page, if you will, the revenue variance and expenditure variance, to how E&D gets calculated. If you have questions on it, I'm happy to go into this in more detail. if you want to torture yourself and submit to that. But hopefully it's understandable. So the E&D reserve at fiscal year end looks to be somewhat down, but we're still within the targeted range. I should point out that the target of between 4 and 4.5%, actually, if we hit the target, was going to set us up for a reduction in the percentage. We're still over 3.5, close to $4 million. That's my estimate. They're based on the preliminary budget numbers and what I anticipate to be DOR adjustments when they come and do the certification. So here's a quick snapshot of E&D usages during since full regionalization. Up until the last 3 years, the district put an amount into the budget to reduce the assessments. I've called that now the regular E&D usage. It was $300,000 the first year. It's been $200,000 ever since. Starting in FY18, we have found specific uses for E&D. You may remember the Leary Field lights, the feasibility study. Last year, the capper was the $1 million transfer to establish the capital stabilization fund. And for FY20, we've got a total of just about $500,000 worth of additional uses, a couple of extra buses. We put in the last $180,000 to balance out the budget during budget season, and there was one more, increasing the capital outlay from $1 million to $1.25 million. We did that through use of E&D. So what's new for fiscal 2020? The conference committee budget, I believe the governor has signed it now, so it's in law that we will receive $30 per pupil minimum aid in Chapter 70, increase from last year. That's what we budgeted. There's a few dollars difference because of the enrollment, the way they calculate foundation enrollment. Regional transportation aid, the percentage that's built into the cherry sheet isn't available, but it looks to me as though it's a higher percentage than would have been built into our budget. We won't know until later in the year what they've certified, what we submit to them as costs. It's a reimbursement program, so it'll be based on FY19 costs, which they don't know yet, and the final percentage won't be established until June if it's like prior years. Other revenues, we are still chasing. The revenue budget is still chasing actual. I have said this, I will have said this now for 3 years. We're closing in on it, but as we get closer to the prior year actual, the next year actual gets higher still. And the two items here are Medicaid reimbursement and interest income. We'll have more details about that, but it appears as though we're going to have favorable results again in FY20 for those two things. JD just talked about the CIP. That's underway. It's fantastic. I can't believe the extent and the foresight and the tightness of what has happened, and the district is going to be very well served by that program. And Chuck's not here. He doesn't know yet how lucky he will be to get to oversee a plan that's in place and not necessarily be the one to put together an advocacy for something that hasn't been addressed. FY21 budget process is around the corner, as are contract negotiations for the labor units in the district that will impact the FY21 budget. And lastly, you'll hear more about this in the new school update. December special town meetings will decide the fate of the project moving forward, and there'll be a lot more information between now and then. So in keeping with the mad scientist theme, are there any questions?
If we turn the page to E&D reserve by fiscal year that bar chart, that bar graph, the next one actually. Yeah, this one. So my question is that because it's interesting to me that if I draw a curve over the top of each bar, right? So so you will see the curve there on the top each bar. So you will see the curve there. So I'm interested to know, going forward, because our range is between 4 and 4.5%, right? Going forward, what's your veil that the curve will close to the 4.5 you prefer, or close to the 4, or you want that just a flat line, probably between middle?
So I'm going to digress for 1 second and wish that JD was here to non-answer this question like he non-answered yours about how much longer is the Blanchard School going to live. I don't know, Michael, obviously. We have a target now of between 4 and 4.5. Best case, now understand, the bars themselves are dollars, not percentages. The percentages are in parentheses at the bottom of the graph. So, but even still, because 4.7 was the highest, it would still track that same curve to this point. What I would expect, the intent of the target going forward, is that it's going to modulate between 4 and 4.5%. Some years we had more revenue, we turned back more expenses than we had budgeted, some years less. It will be tremendous to be able to land the plane with that precision, because we talk about a $800,000 turnback or so is 1%. Well, the gap of 4 to 4.5% of E&D is an even tighter band to land on every year. There might be creativity involved in how we either prepay expenses like we did this year or not, but it's going to be tough to foresee for a long period of time. Oh yeah, we'll be able to stay within 4 to 4.5%. It's a target. It's not, you can't, by virtue of the target in the policy, say, well, we have to be in that range. It's going to depend on actual financial circumstances.
Right, I do understand. It's not going to merge to a line, right? So, like if I draw a 4% line there, right?
No.
If I use the Y as the percentage, so if I draw 4% and draw another 4.5%, so we're not going to see the merge to either of them, right? We'll see this.
The good thing we have going for us, though, looking at this slide, we were still able to end at, I'm projecting we're going to end at 4.2%, despite, look at the light blue line, despite how much of E&D was used this year. Almost $1 million more than is budgeted so far for FY20. We're not anticipating another $1 million investment into the capital stabilization. That presumably was a one-time phenomenon, unless some other things happen. That said, if it happens that at the end of the year we have a surplus that was unforeseen, we now have a vehicle which can accommodate it and help to support the CIP.
I have little enthusiasm for torturing myself, but I have some enthusiasm for torturing you.
Okay.
First, I'd like to say that the memo was great, and I think this is exactly the exemplification of best practice. So all the details are there for staff, for school committee members, or the public, whoever wants to look into it, and then we also get the high level, and here's what you really know. So I absolutely love that. I was going to ask a little bit different question, but let me go back to what you were just talking to Michael about. My understanding of E&D and the stabilization fund working together to provide, a more robust buffer in toto, is that when we looked around the country, if you look at regional school districts and the size of buffer that would be appropriate, it's more like a 7, 8, 9% kind of buffer. It's not the capped 5% by MGL that we have to deal with in END. And so therefore, to the extent that we have budget favorability going forward, my expectation was that a piece of that would be used to continue to build the stabilization fund until the sum of END and stabilization was some number that we haven't talked about, but I assumed was a number like 7, 8, or 9%. Is that a correct understanding?
It is not mine, John, but it's up to the committee to determine if excess funds are identified, where to put them. I for one don't have, even in my head, a target of where I'd like to be someday in the totality of the district's reserves. I think the district is in fine shape with respect to the rating agencies and creditworthiness for bond rating, and ultimately when it sells the bonds to finance the new school. This being able to say we have significant assets also set aside in a capital stabilization fund certainly doesn't hurt that message.
Jump in on that?
Yeah.
So, I think as we talked internally as a staff about our hopes for the stabilization fund, I think we talked at a little bit more granular level with it, where, we would like to have in our stabilization fund enough funds that, 2 major systems could fail in a school year, and we wouldn't have to change the operating budget to be able to repair, replace whatever we needed to do with those systems, plus funds that are earmarked towards specific longer-term projects that we know are coming up. Because I think one of the advantages of having a stabilization fund is you can actually save for some of the future expenses of the district, and I keep coming back to the Parker Damon roof is going to be a multi-million-dollar project coming up probably in about a decade, give or take a few years, and that's several $1 million that we would never be able to fund through our operating budget. But what we have an opportunity to do is continue to put money into that stabilization fund as reserve, so when a project like that comes up, it's fully funded and can be done without having further damage to buildings or having capital fall into disrepair. So it's really about protecting for unforeseen emergencies, planning for future expenses that could be known, that could include fields, it could include building systems, things like that. But that was really our intent.
Can I
Is it quick?
Yeah, well, it depends what Dave says. The question is, with the late state budget, and then you also talked about some of the things that happened late in the year, the question is, what would you like school committee members to be providing as feedback to the legislature about the practical impact of the late budget and any other things that they are acting on behind schedule? And you don't have to answer that now. If you want to send an email out saying, I thought about it, here's what I'm thinking, that would be good.
This is quick. The late budget is not beyond our control. It's not, and didn't impact us because they settled on the same number that we had budgeted. Whether they go into Chapter 70 foundation budget reform, I don't know. There's been some discussion about that among committee members, and that's something that you may wish to speak to legislators about.
And very quickly, John, I would point you to policy DP, which we approved last year, which dictates which gives guidance on the size and funding methods for the stabilization fund, which sets targets in there.
My understanding was that the purpose of that stabilization, the reason why we created it was because we saw that in the whole scheme of budgeting for the capital improvements in the short term and the long term, there was a need a few years from now where the operational budget wasn't going to be as substantial or robust as we'd like, and the stabilization fund was going to be there to meet the need. So it's not something, I never even thought of stabilization plus E&D being a certain value.
The Triton School Committee has been studying circuit breaker and its impact on regional school districts. Once the recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission start to be implemented by the state legislature and build up the foundation budget and consequently the per pupil cost. Now the per pupil cost is a key part of the algorithm for circuit breaker. So without going into a lot of detail, what I thought I heard you say is that we have enough in circuit breaker reserves to kind of absorb any like losses that are anticipated as a result of our not receiving the benefit of the foundation budget increases. So the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I would like to know if we should be advocating now with the state for an offset in any unanticipated, estimated at this point, losses that we would incur due to this change in the foundation budget.
So without getting into the details, as you said, my answer would be yes. So if changes to the foundation budget have the, in my view, unintended consequence of hurting over half the districts in the state in their circuit breaker reimbursement, I think the legislature, if they haven't baked that into their proposals already, ought to be encouraged by their constituents to say, if you're not going to give us any more Chapter 70, or if you're not going to significantly add to our Chapter 70, certainly don't take away our circuit breaker.
Okay, so item 5.1 is the beginning of our new business, school committee business. In your packet, you have the operating protocols that we put together last year and that were signed at our workshop this year. And the idea last year was that we would move forward with our meetings, having a copy of the operating protocols available to each member to just keep in mind as we conduct our business together. So I just encourage you to read them and go over them again. Did anyone have questions or comments or things? A little bit of question came up at our workshop, so if anyone wants to have that discussion now in terms of the language, or now is the time. So,
one small thing, and I don't have it before me right now. In the beginning, there was a mention of bias, and I'm not even sure I want to look for it now, but there was a mention of something about we will not be biased. And so now with our kind of new understanding of anti-bias, I was wondering if that language might be inappropriate. I would, of course, have to find the language to be more specific.
oh, base our decisions on available facts, vote our convictions, avoid bias.
Yes, and so now that bias we know is unavoidable, do we want to change the language in that particular section?
I guess, I don't know. How do people feel about that? I mean, is that something, at this point, we don't have the operating protocols subcommittee anymore, so I imagine any changes we make, we would send to policy. Was there something else, John, that you had mentioned at the last?
Let me just respond to Diane. So I agree that, if the decision was that we wanted to revisit the operating protocols, I think that is an appropriate thing to consider, because we know we're biased, so we might as well just fess up to that, and our policy should speak to who we are. Yeah, I think the other concern that I had about the policy is, I think it is very much, couched in the perspective of we're here for education, and I think it needs to be a little bit more reflective of we're here for the community, and one of the high values of the community is education. But the responsibility of the school committee is deeper than simply focusing on the educational mission. It needs to understand that mission in the context of the totality of the community. There's other things going on. So the school committee, doesn't, draw a line around education, says that's what it is. And when I looked at the protocol, that's what it felt like to me. So I would like, at some point, if we revisit this, to see that we really do embrace, the broader mission, that we're elected by the community at large, to represent the community at large, to make sure that what we do educationally fits into our Acton and Boxborough communities.
So, just so that I can clarify, your concern is basically with the first paragraph before we even get into the operating protocols, around the description of who we are, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess the question is, how how pressing is this? Do people feel, I mean, we signed them and they're fine. I mean, they're operational for this year. If there's a consensus amongst, or a sense amongst the committee that you want to send this to policy, I think would be the appropriate place to relook at some of the language, if that's the question. Is that something that you want to do? Or is it okay for now? Oh, Mike, sorry. Michael, do you want to comment on that, or can Adam go?
I like, and I apologize for missing the workshop, but I think the workshop is a great avenue to discuss these, and so my suggestion would be to keep these notes for the workshop for next year and have that be another opportunity to revisit these with lessons learned from these previous years, and maybe that becomes an agenda item for whomever is the lucky chairperson for next year who gets to run that workshop.
And actually, with regards to that, we had talked at the workshop of having a follow-up workshop to continue working on some of the things that were brought forward, and so maybe we could do it there as well, if that seemed appropriate. Michael, did you have a couple comments?
So first off, I appreciate this open discussion on this protocol. Second, that, I do notice that, in the first bullet paragraph, we have create policy, we have developed budgets. Yeah, they are the major responsibility of the school committee members, and also the school committee members. There's one more, which is searching and hiring the superintendent. I know that we already have Peter here. We don't have to make a replacement, right? But the things that I do feel that we shouldn't avoid that responsibility from here. That's what I'm saying. So I do understand we have support the superintendent and staff in their implementation of policies and operations whatsoever. We do have those support bullets there, but the things that, as one of the three major responsibility of school committee members. So I do have, hiring the superintendent, so.
Well, then it sounds like, one of the other things, actually, that I had a question that I made some notes, Michael, after our last conversation, was in terms of maintaining effective communication, and maybe we can talk about this. It's sort of a dual conversation, so you can hold your thoughts on it for a minute, because we'd also talk about the next thing on the agenda is the new school committee member guidebook. But in terms of communication, there had been a question about questions and compiling them ahead of a meeting when there are a lot of questions. So one of the practices that had been in place was that the superintendent would collect the questions that were submitted ahead of the meeting, especially when there's a topic where there's a lot of discussion or clarification needed, and that document would be presented to the school committee ahead of the meeting, so that you could see what other people had asked ahead of time. But there are questions about whether or not people that send questions ahead of time intend for those questions to be public and published, which is an entirely different question. Some people may want that when they send a question. Obviously, it's all a public document, but not only if someone requests it. So that's a lot different than producing something for a meeting that is then part of our packet that everybody can see. So that's something that's one of our protocols, and also something that's mentioned in the guidebook. So just something to keep in mind as we have the next discussion. So it sounds to me around the language that we can table it for now and maybe consider looking at the language again when we have our follow-up workshop. Okay, so Diane, would you like to talk about the guidebook?
Okay, I hope everyone had a chance to look at the updated guidebook. My goals for updating the guidebook were to clarify our role as a governing body, to define jargon, to offer some guidance on how to communicate without breaking the law and damaging vital relationships, to give you quick and effective electronic access to resources through embedded links in the text. I also wanted to break down the budget process, and not just in terms of a timeline, but to help you think about the nature of the work in each phase. And then finally, to emphasize the importance of our advocacy groups, like the Mass Association of School Committees, the Mass Association of Regional Schools, and most recently Support Mass Regional Schools, which is on Facebook. Because these are the folks who set the work we do in the larger context of what's happening at the state level. So hopefully the takeaway was that the work is dizzyingly vast, even for veterans, and to take your time. You will find that you gravitate, and I think most of the people on the committee, members have experienced this, you'll gravitate eventually to a specific set of issues and kind of subspecialize based on your interest. I think it is also helpful to understand what is best practice for membership on any board you might find yourself on. Hence, I put those starred items in. I think it was like around page 3. Find mentors was another big one for me. These are the folks willing to take the time to create the conditions to set you up for success and to be there to answer questions. My hope is that the guidebook will help you feel more comfortable more quickly in our role and give you a deeper understanding of the limitations and basis of authority for the work we do, so we can get to the business of passionate deliberation and be a strong, high-functioning team whose members trust and challenge one another and engage on the critical issues we face on behalf of the 5,700 students in AB. So I very much welcome your questions and your feedback on this, especially the newer members. So if you have any, I don't know if you want to just have people email me or react to it now. But I'm happy to answer any questions or take feedback.
Yeah, so one section that I find that I'm still not clear, which is the motion process. So there are many different kind of motion. And as a new member, that sometimes you don't know when and what kind of motion that you can make. I would recommend that we add some clarify in the process of what kind of motion, list of motions that we can make. Thank you.
I was thrilled to see this new orientation manual. It represents a tremendous amount of effort and is really good in terms of getting people started. But I'll actually use, one of the points of feedback to sort of illustrate what I think, is missing and that everybody needs to appreciate. And that is, it's very true that everyone needs to have some level of general understanding. But it also is true that people need to, at times, specialize and do sort of unique tasks, which is exactly what this manual is. We don't need, 11 people writing a manual, but we needed somebody to do it. And I think that good service on the school committee requires not just that I understand the general things, I'm participating in the general discussion, but I can find some things that I'm excited about or I have special expertise. And in this case, I think, your experience as the chair very much played into your ability to have a vision about what this document should be and use that to do something so that each member, has a unique contribution. So I would hope that when we welcome new members on to the committee, one of the things we would do is to, encourage them not only to be part of the general discussion, but to bring, that unique thing and to find their own work that they can bring to the table.
Yes, Nora.
Do I have to keep this pressed? Okay. So I didn't see the previous version, so I can't really speak to the change, but I found this incredibly helpful. I really liked having the links. I thought that was great, that it felt very organized and succinct, and it also had a really kind and supportive tone to it, which I think is really nice to have. And, just the links to common protocols, for example, around how to make a motion, just having that link in there made it not an overwhelming document, but that I could find what I needed. So I thought it was great. It was really helpful.
I just have one suggestion is that, because when we talk about the laws, right, if any example that, we want to explain the law, probably we'll want to put a link there, a reference to somewhere that, instead of we kind of explain the law, we speak what does it mean, right? So that's my only suggestion. Probably I echo what she said. Maybe more links will be helpful.
All
All right, well, John, thank you, Diane. I know that you put a tremendous amount of work into completing that over the summer on your vacation time, so I appreciate it. John's comment was actually a perfect segue into our next agenda item, the subcommittee reports. So on the table, you will find the subcommittee assignments. In the packet, you will find our policy around duties of the chairperson and how subcommittees are assigned. So when I assigned the subcommittees, I took many things into account. A lot of it was what people asked for. With the exception of one member, everyone is on one of the two major committees, either budget or policy. I mean, that being said, school building is a large committee, an important committee, and negotiations is an important committee. So I don't think I need to read them out loud to you. What I do want to tell you is that on some of those larger committees, we did limit them to 5. I did indicate who the chair of that committee would be. You may note that we added John to the negotiations subcommittee. And there are some places where there are question marks, and that is mostly as liaisons. No one stepped up to be the Acton FinCom liaison or the Acton VOS liaison. We need a Boxborough FinCom liaison, and we also need someone to represent for Minuteman Tech, and that would be an Acton member, because Boxborough's no longer a member of that region. So you don't need to tell me tonight if you would like to take on one of those additional roles that still has question marks. We also need more people for warrants, because Amy and I are going to be running up and down, back and forth to the junior high signing all the time if there aren't additional people on that. So with that said, if you're unhappy or have a question or want to reach out to me about somewhere that I put you or didn't put you, like I said, when I went through doing it, budget and policy, I didn't want anyone to serve on both, because there was enough representatives of people that wanted to serve on both of them that it made sense to divide it up that way. I would also say that once we get into the work of these committees, if you find that you're unable to make the commitment to one of the committees that you've been assigned to, that you come to me as soon as possible so that we can find someone else, or make some adjustments and figure out how to make it work. Does anyone have any questions? Excellent. The one thing that we do need to vote, and this is a good example, Angie, of where the motion is included in, well, maybe, did we include a motion? Maybe we didn't include a motion. We need to approve the EDCO assignments. That's the one thing that we're required to approve as far as that goes. So if I can have a motion to approve the EDCO assignments. Great. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. The motion passes unanimously.
So just to add one layer to this, originally in the posted packet, we had a memo regarding the superintendent's appointments for board members to the OPEB trust. That has been done historically because it was stipulated to do that in the regional agreement that the superintendent appointed, and then, no? OPEB trust agreement, sorry, not the regional agreement, the OPEB trust agreement. It was stipulated the superintendent appointed and then notified the committee of those appointments. However, Diane sent us a reference in state law that said that that was voted by the governing body, and so we sent that out to the attorney for clarification, and it came back that we should be voting that, so as a school committee. So what we've done is we've withdrawn it from this packet. That will come back to you as a recommendation in the future packet. Same names, same memo, but it will be a recommendation. We'll be asking you to vote that in early September.
All right. Agenda item 6.1, school building committee update. Adam.
I'll be brief since Peter stole most of my thunder. We did submit our preferred schematic report on June 26th, which was approved, and that puts us now into the schematic design phase. And we are developing a robust schematic design that will be sufficient enough to detail the scope, budget, and schedule for our proposed project. Along those lines, the MSBA has reconfirmed our enrollment figures at 990 students for K through 6th grade. That's important because that's what we use to then size the school and the number of classrooms and everything moving forward on the design. And speaking of the design, we have seen a number of revisions by Aero Street on the design to get it more cleaned up for costing, and we've sent the specifications out to estimators for costing, and as Peter mentioned, we'll see those in the next 2 meetings that the school building committee has. And during those meetings, we'll take a look at all those items and look at the cost for each of those items and begin to have some thoughtful discussions around what makes sense from a program standpoint and what makes sense from a budgetary standpoint. And then obviously our next big date is September 11th, when we submit our schematic design with costs to the MSBA. Following that, they will vote to approve our project on October 30th, our schematic design, and move us into the next phase. And I would just add, if anybody wants to come to the school building committee, they're very exciting. We're getting VR goggles brought oftentimes to the meeting, and everyone makes a fool of themselves, sort of stumbling around the room as they explore the building in VR.
Just have to go. All right, thank you, Adam. Diane, did you want to? Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand, Michael. Go ahead.
So, do we, because we are closing to have the total number, right? The total cost and the effective reimbursement rate. Do we have a range right now? The very smaller range, you could prevail. You could disclose, or
So we have a cost range that's on the website right now that's been shared in all of the public forums, and that's the number that we will continue to use until we get this next round of estimating in. And as those numbers come in, then, as Peter mentioned, we'll put those onto the school building website.
And also that number including the effective reimbursement rate, right?
The effective reimbursement rate, Peter, can you? I think we've not confirmed yet what that is. Is that correct?
That is correct. So currently, the effective reimbursement, the net reimbursement rate is sitting at 49.7. We gained 3.75 additional points over this past summer, 2 of which were for our sustainability initiatives that we've put into the building, and we got an additional 1.75 for capital planning, which is how we're maintaining the other buildings in the district. So that was good news, and that's certainly reflective of a lot of the work of this group over the last few years. What will happen is we will submit the schematic design to the state, and they will review that for ineligible items. And I can give you a good concrete example of something that would be deemed ineligible. Site costs. So anything related to the demolition, construction of parking areas, tearing down Douglas, creating ball fields, anything related to the actual site work of the building is capped at 8% of the total construction costs. So most building projects, nearly all, exceed 8% because we know that site costs just naturally exceed 8% of your building project. MSBA chooses to cap it because they prefer their dollars to go into the actual building for students, so they say that's on the community. So we know that the effective rate will be lower than the net rate. We don't have a number yet as to how much. That will come out of the October 28th board meeting at MSBA. Typically, districts are ranging somewhere around 10% less than the effective rate. So, we're up just under 50%. I would guess somewhere around 40% is what we're trying to target for the effective rate when it comes out. But we don't have any guarantees. It's really MSBA's decision.
And I would just add that information comes to us. I believe it's on that late October date, we'll October 28th meeting, they'll then come back to us with our reimbursement rate and approved costs, and that's what we'll then use to go to town meetings.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. All right. Diane, did you want to report on the MSC summer workshop that you attended?
So MASC had its Summer Institute, as it usually does, in mid-July. It was on the 12th and the 13th, and they called it an equity summit. Almost every district is doing work on equity now. There were 3 phenomenal presentations. The first one Friday evening was called Understanding the Dynamics of Power, Privilege, and Prejudice, and it was like a mini seed workshop for those of you who went, just really recognizing what you pretty much take for granted and don't really see as you walk through life as someone who has white privilege. And it was really amazing. The people who ran it, Manuel Fernandez, I believe his name is, he is the principal of a middle school in Cambridge, who's just a phenomenal presenter. And Dr. Des Floyd ran that workshop. The 2 on Saturday, one was on equity audits, and one was on policies relating to equity. They also had, I actually didn't go on to the policy one because I went to a workshop on social media uses and abuses, which I found very helpful. But the equity piece, they were looking at how our leadership teams, like across the Commonwealth, thinking about equity and what initiatives are surfacing due to that work. And they had presenters from Lexington, Amherst Pelham, Framingham, and the Cambridge Public Schools. And so, like, what everyone seems to be doing is providing professional development on implicit bias. So, like, the analogous thing in our, the equivalent thing in our district, in our long-range strategic plan, is the SEED training for all staff and teachers. Everyone's pretty much doing an equity audit. Either internally, there are a number of districts who are hiring assistant superintendents or directors of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're doing internal audits themselves, or like Lexington's hiring the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium to come do their audit. And the impetus of all this work is actually coming from school committees, like in Amherst Pelham, and from the community in Lexington, and from central office teams. But the work is all about engaging stakeholders and giving them a voice in what works for their community. So you see a lot of caucuses springing up, and it's not a top-down initiative. It's really more of like an open government model. I'm just going to let you know, this Lexington, the superintendent in Lexington, Julie Hackett, wrote this paper called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Lexington Public Schools. It is absolutely like a must-read if you're interested in how they're thinking about equity in their district. The audits themselves target things that we're targeting, like workforce diversity, looking at implicit bias in hiring practices. We've done both of those things in AB. Professional development for teachers and staff on unconscious bias, which we're also doing. But the 2 big initiatives that are coming out of districts are a hard look at discipline and the disparities on the rates of discipline by race and disability. And they're launching initiatives to address that. And it's really interesting. If you read this paper, you'll find that the research on discipline, it's not what you think it is. It's not like, well, these groups are just getting into more trouble, so that's why the rates are higher. It's not like that at all. It's really interesting. Like, larger schools have higher rates. I mean, you can read what the research says. It's just really fascinating. The other 2 pieces are restorative justice practices are finding their way into schools, especially as discipline is rethought. Amherst Pelham is trying to do that. It tends to be expensive and in its infancy in terms of how to apply that in a school environment. For those of you who don't know, I work as a volunteer for Communities for Restorative Justice, which is a partnership between with police departments, and it's a different way to think about committing crime in the context that I work in it. It's not like you do the crime and you pay a fine, or you go to jail, or you kind of do you suffer a consequence. It's a different understanding of crime as a disruption of relationships that need to be then repaired. So applying that to school is like, it's a big deal, and it's really important work. And again, it's in its infancy. The other big piece was access to honors and AP classes. And Cambridge and Lexington are doing an awful lot of work in this area. Cambridge specifically has done something called leveling up. So all freshmen take honors English and honors world history, all ninth graders, and extensive supports are put in place, and family school partnerships are put in place to support all that learning. But they're really, like in Lexington, they really want to make their definition of equity actionable, and I'll end with this. I just think it's so powerful. I'm just going to read what their definition is. Each student, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender identity, disability, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, will have access to the opportunities, resources, and supports they need to attain their full potential. And racial equity means the absence of institutional and structural barriers. So these initiatives, they're bold, and they try to make that statement actionable in a very powerful way. It takes a lot of work to get there in these districts, but I have to tell you that this was like one of the most exciting workshops, lectures, summits I have ever attended. And I encourage you to go to the MASC summer workshops and the one in November as well. The work is ongoing, and I'm sure we'll be hearing much more about it. So I'm happy to share that tonight.
Thank you, Diane. Okay. The next thing is the Acton Leadership Group minutes of June 20th, May 16th, and April 2nd are included in your packet. Is there any update from anyone who went to the ALG meetings that is, I don't know, significant?
I haven't talked this much the whole time I was chair.
Sorry, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, so July 31st, there was an ALG meeting, and you know, we received reports from the town manager, and Peter was also there, on the close of FY19, a little bit of an update on FY20. Not much going on. Like we're just like the district is closing out in unfavorable terms financially, so is the town. Pam Nurse was there, who is the Acton rep to the Minuteman School Committee, and she reported that enrollment this year is projected to be 630 students. So the school is full, and they're looking at developing a waitlist policy at this point over there. They're very excited to open their new building in the fall. That we also spoke about the debt exclusions coming up. So there's a North Acton Fire Station on the docket. Of course, the twin schools, the consolidated schools on our end. So just stay tuned. We're going to be meeting again in August. So thank you.
Okay. Agenda item 7 is the statement of warrants and the approval of minutes. There are 4 warrants on the agenda now being circulated. Vendor warrants 20-002, 20-003PR, and 20-003A, in the total amount of $2,216,901.48. And payroll warrant P2003 in the total amount of $659,543.81. Thank you. Included in your packet are the minutes of the July 16th, 2019 workshop. Is there any discussion needed on those? If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 16th? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries almost unanimously. It's technically. He abstained, yeah. All right. And item 8 is the FYI. In your packet is a paper about the back-to-school times and dates with the school calendar, the upcoming school committee meeting dates, the ABSAF support memo, open government message. Is there anything that you wanted to, the OPEB thing we took off, right? and the Acton and Boxborough special town meetings that are now scheduled for December 10th, 2019. Our next meeting is September 5th at 7 p.m. here in the junior high library. The packet will be posted on August 29th. Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.